All right. Good evening. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Marshall. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at the University of Toledo Alumni Association. On behalf of the Alumni Association, thank you so much for joining us. A special thank you goes out to Earnest Brew Works for joining us and working with us to make this event happen. We've been looking forward to this for quite some time, so we're really excited to have you guys on board. I would also like to thank all of you tuning in at home. The Alumni Association is continuing to reach all of our alumni and friends across the board during this COVID pandemic, and we've added quite a bit of virtual programming in hopes of providing opportunities for all of you to stay connected. So we really appreciate you joining us. This has really been our only option in connecting with our alumni and friends, and it's been really interesting and really fun to have this opportunity. So housekeeping notes, as a friendly reminder, all participants are currently on mute, and this program is being recorded for you to view on demand at a later date. Please feel free to use the Q&A box that you should see on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions throughout the event. And I would now like to introduce to you my colleague, Paul Smith, who is going to start us off this evening. Paul?
Thank you, Sam. Good evening, everyone. Assistant Directors in the Alumni Office. I would like to first introduce the owners of Earnest Brew Works, Scot Yarnell and Keefe Snyder. Earnest Brew Works is a brewer-owned brewery with a tap room in South Toledo. Their mission is to brew great beers for our community's enjoyment. Earnest Brew Works is a vision of two home brewers who are with us here tonight who wanted to share their passion and love for craft beer. Beers brewed at Earnest both pay homage to traditional beer styles while also bringing in a fresh take on ingredients. The word earnest means serious intention, purpose, showing depth and sincerity. This captures the brewer's attitude towards their beer and brewing. We'd like to thank Scot and Keefe and offer them a warm virtual welcome. Scot and Keefe, good evening. So I'll ask Keefe to start us off here. There's so many things that we would love to talk to you about tonight. A lot of questions, a lot of things to dive into, some guest tasters that are hopefully going to pop on here soon. But first and foremost, let's taste some of the beer. Let's start us off with the Easy beer. And because we do have some new people, some people that haven't done one of our beer tastings before, if you don't mind explaining the ABV, the SRM, and the IBU, what those numbers mean, because I know every beer has them listed on the can as well as the tasting sheet that you probably received via email. So Keefe, if you could kind of tell us what to expect with Easy as well as kind of talk us through those numbers.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having us. We're excited about doing these kind of things. First off, to give you a little bit of background on Easy. So Easy is the lightest beer we make currently. It's a genuine ale in the sense that it uses an ale yeast, but it has a lot of lager-like characteristics, which means that it has a clean finish and it's fairly easy to drink. So we sort of tweaked a lot of standard formulations for an ale to make this one come off more like a lighter beer. And it's definitely a beer that has crossover appeal to people. It is a very well-balanced beer, meaning that it's not too sweet, not too malty, and not too bitter from the use of too much hops. And it has very little discernible hop flavor or aroma as well. As for the numbers, ABV means alcohol by volume. So as a percentage of the total can, everybody's pretty much familiar with that. This is one of our ones on the lower end of the spectrum at 5.2. We have beers that go all the way up to 15%. But typically for a canned product, it stays in the 5 to 9% range. IBUs, that stands for International Bittering Unit. It is a measurement of how much bittering components of the hops get put into the beer themselves. And so a lighter beer a beer that appears or that is perceived as malty is going to be on the lower end of the spectrum, and a beer that is balanced is going to be higher than that, and a beer that is on the hoppier end of the spectrum will be higher yet still, with a lot of IPAs starting in that 50 range and going up to sometimes over 100, although that's very rare nowadays. And as for SRM, that is stands for Standard Reference Method, which is a term used by brewing chemists to distinguish the colors of beer on a spectrum of a very, very light straw-colored beer to the darkest dark, with the whole array of browns, ambers, and oranges in between. So, yeah. Any clarifications needed there, Paul?
Yeah, we do have a lot of questions, so we'll get started with that tonight. Now, the first, I guess, before the question, probably should go back almost down memory lane, if you will. I'll start with a quick story and then get with the initial question. But my commute to UT has always gone from the trail to Detroit to Bern. So I actually remember seeing the Earnest Brew Works sign go up and being really excited when I saw the word brew, but not really knowing what Brew Works was. I'll be honest, I was excited, but I figured maybe it was just another coffee bar. In fact, I remember thinking, God, like, please not another coffee bar. Please have something to do with beer. And it did. And I think it's safe to say, well, first, thank you for not opening a coffee bar. No offense to coffee. But also, I think obviously you've done great things there. You've blown everyone's wildest expectations, I think, for the great beer that they've been able to taste there. And so I know you guys have had a lot of press. I saw last weekend you had a limited release that made it in the Cleveland press. But before all that, you guys obviously had an idea and a dream. And if you could take us back to that, I know you obviously both are UT alumni, some more than once. So if you could kind of explain what you did prior to Earnest and then what motivated you to open Earnest. I know there's a lot of home brewing experience as well. So what helped you make that leap of faith to opening Earnest Brew Works? And let's start with Scott. If you could, we'll start with you, then Keefe. Obviously, you can.
Yeah. Well, me personally, I worked at ProMedica for 20 years, repairing X-ray machines. And I'll tell you what, this is a lot more creative. There was zero creativity when you repair an X-ray machine. It's got to be repaired to the same parts, exactly the same right way. You can't rig it up. You can't change it. So there was no creativity. Been a home brewer for over 20 years, and that's how I met Keefe, is at a homebrew meeting. This is a national blast from the Glass City Mashers, my homebrew club. Keefe and I met there. We met monthly, and then after a couple of meetings, I got to know Keefe a little better. We realized we lived within a couple of blocks of each other, so we started brewing beer together. And anytime you get homebrewers together, they love to talk about opening up a brewery. And then in 2013, the governor of Ohio signed into legislation, a license that made it easier to open up a brewery. And you can see we had less than 100 breweries in 2013, and now we're at close to 300. So it really did help. We have legislation change that made it easier to open a brewery. Easier meaning it was less cost. You can do more stuff with the license than you could before, less hassle. So that's what really, really increased the amount of breweries we have. And I think now we have, when I count in Northwest Ohio, we have something like 25 breweries in Northwest Ohio.
That's great. Keefe, was anything you would like to add regarding the experience of opening Earnest? What was your background prior to?
So I was actually an intellectual property law attorney. I was only a few years into practicing, but I have been practicing full time for 6 years before pivoting to the brewery. But it was an interesting field to be in. It's a lot of deep thought, a lot of research with some very intelligent people. You also get to craft your arguments as good as you can to try to overcome rejections from the patent office when you're trying to argue for a patent for a client. I primarily did automotive related technologies, mechanical, electromechanical systems, transmissions, all sorts of stuff, but all sorts of weird ball things too, from farm equipment to different home type devices here and there. But yeah, it was a great experience. But I got into homebrewing very intensely, and it was a hobby that started to take over other parts of my life. And well, yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
Well, I think we're very grateful that you both decided to take that leap of faith and make this happen. I think we're ready for our second beer. Sam, you want to take us for that?
Absolutely. So thank you, gentlemen, for leading us through the first tasting of the evening. So we're going to roll right into the second beer, which is Spice is Right. And I have to apologize. There is not a scenario where I can't immediately start singing a Spice Girl song in my head. I don't know what. It's just, I can't not do it. So Scott, let's start with you. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of information about this beer, and then we'll go into some of the questions that were submitted.
All right, well, Sam, this one actually, if you could just give us the Keefe, because this actually has a pretty interesting story, and it was Keefe that did this beer, and it was a lot of work to make this beer. Some beers are easy. This one went from work. So Keefe, yeah, if Keefe can answer this one, that'd be best.
Okay. So, yeah. The Spice is Right. It came about because we participated in a fundraiser for LLS, and the organizer of this fundraiser group wanted us to donate a collaborative effort with the auction winner. And so the idea was that this item goes up for auction, and you get to work with us to develop a beer. And we agreed to it, knowing that we were going to work it in as a seasonal offering whenever the time came up. And so it was auctioned off in late spring, and about August was when everything got underway to actually brew the beer. And the auction winner of this item is Braston Stocky, and he is one of the chefs at J. Alexander's. And we talked about it being a seasonal beer, and he wanted to do something that, well, once he found out the release time, he wanted to do it as a holiday beer, but he also didn't want to go the traditional route for holiday beers, which are bigger, maltier, spiced beers. He wanted a holiday beer that could appeal to a broader number of people. And we have a couple other recipes that focus on a lighter malt profile. And so working around those and a blend of spices, which was based on a seasonal dessert they do, we came up with the Spice is Right, which it is a blend. The spices that get added to it are a blend of cinnamon, ginger, and what is the third one? What is the third one? Is it on here? A little bit of clove, cinnamon, ginger, and clove. And the proportions, actually, Braston and I sat down and worked out the proportions as to what we like the best in a beer. And we did about 20 different trials with its spices. It was a very hard work, let me tell you. And once we came up with the ratios, we scaled it all up, and that was it. We pretty much nailed it out of the park the first try. We held back the option of having to add more spice post-fermentation if we needed to, but we didn't need it. And that was, I think, about 3 years ago now. This is the third season we've brewed this beer. It's turned into a very popular one. We canned it last year as well and sold a fair amount of it. And we expect to sell a fair amount of it this year to those people who like a spiced holiday beer, but might not like those darker, more malty, malt-forward beers. So,
well, you guys nailed it. So I'm so glad and figured out the right ratios, because you did a fantastic job. It's very good. Thank you. And Scott, I didn't get you unmuted quick enough. I apologize, and I'm gonna pick on you for a minute, because I feel like you got something going on over there. You look like you have the right glass for each one, and there must be a system to the tasting. And I'm embarrassed to say that the glass I'm drinking out of has my name on it because that happened, and it says housewife, which I'm not a housewife, but somebody made this for me, and it's probably the worst glass to choose, but I panicked and picked one out of the cupboard. But Scott, would you mind, earlier in our practice session, you were kind of talking about the different glasses that you had, and we were kind of talking about the proper way to go through a tasting. And would you mind kind of walking us through that? Just, you know, do you use the same glass? Are you supposed to change your glass?
Well, yeah. Okay, yeah, there's a very formal way you're supposed to do the tastings. A new fresh glass, cleanse your palate with a cracker, unsalted, between each tasting. But we're not so formal today. I've done some beer judging in the past. Yeah, there are contests for beer, and it is exactly what you think it is when you're judging. You're drinking the beers. They're judged to our criteria. So you often start by whenever you pour the beer, and look up for clarity. You try to get a nice head on there. Head retention is important to a nice pour. And then you get the aroma going. And I do this quite a bit still. Even when I go out, I'm still doing that. It's hard to do with a can, so you should pour it into a glass. A glass really is nice, yes. And a clean glass is good to use, but you look for clarity. But you got no clarity for style. Some things are not as clear as others because of the style it's made, same with head retention. And then you go to taste the beer after you take in the aroma. And not only your first initial impression is important, but also the aftertaste is important. But really what it comes down to is what do you like? I mean, we have 18 beers on draft at Earnest right now, and there's some of them I have not drank in months, you know. And if people ask me what my favorite is, I go in streaks. For the longest time, for weeks, I was drinking Bach. I really like Bach. And then one of them, my favorites I'm drinking now is Snowy Mountain Crumpet, which is coming up here. I switched to that one. So I don't really have a favorite. In the summertime, it switches around, but they're all good. And this really comes down to what you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't found one that I've disliked yet, so we're on a good roll. So one of the questions that I was really interested in asking you both is just about the different challenges you faced in this industry. And I have to say, I've only been to your location twice, and one of those times was today. And I called Paul immediately after I left. I said, that place is hopping in a good way. I mean, they're doing something right, and it seems that you guys have it all figured out. So it was really great to see everyone that was enjoying and stopping in and picking up their 6-pack. So hi to those of you that I saw online today. But Scott, would you start us off? Is there anything that you want to share as far as challenges that you guys have faced or are facing currently?
Yeah. Well, Keefe and I did a lot of research. I mean, Keefe mentioned he was a patent attorney, which is a lot of research. I fixed x-ray machines. There was no winging it for x-ray machines. ProMedica spent over $100,000 on training school. I spent 5 weeks in Eindhoven, Netherlands for Philips School and all kinds of other stuff. So we do a lot of research just naturally. So getting the business permits, getting all that kind of stuff going was a lot of research, talking to people. And then just getting the business open. One thing that caught us by surprise is how much labor we were going to need. In our original business plan, I think we had two part-timers, and it's grown into we have 13 people working for us now, and several of them are full-time, some are part-time. But also all the bookkeeping, because we're running a lot of stuff. We really didn't realize how much of a business it was going to be to run. We were so focused on beer, recipes, choosing the equipment we need, what are we going to do for a water profile, where are we going to secure the hops from, that we didn't really worry about who's doing our HR, how are we handling things like taxes, and just simple things like this. The QuickBooks, which I've mostly gone to, Keefe does a lot of the brewing stuff. I spend at least an hour or two a day just going out and doing stuff, what you would consider like office work. No matter what business we own, this kind of stuff needs to happen. And when we created our business plan originally, and even when we first started, we weren't as busy. It wasn't that big of a deal. But now the stuff behind the scenes is starting to take up more and more time, including putting together a promotion like this. Took a little bit of time too, But it's been a lot of fun, and we're continuing to learn.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Paul. He is going to start off what is my absolute favorite beer and has been and probably will be. So Paul, I'm going to turn this next one over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. So without further ado, we should probably get into Crunchy Hippie. So I don't know, Keefe, is that one you feel comfortable introducing? It's a fan favorite amongst lots of beer connoisseurs outside of even Northwest Ohio. So
it is our largest selling beer, our biggest seller by volume. But this is a recipe that Scot developed, and he is a little better suited to talk about the formulation and the oddball ingredients it has in it.
Okay, Crunchy Hippie. The story is great. I love the story. Some of these beers, because the licensing process of opening up a brewery takes about a year or so before you actually get open from the time that you get your business going. So Keith and I knew we had time. So some of these recipes that you drink at Earnest Brew Works are old homebrew recipes. Some of them, like Easy, were created while we were in that 1 year period. And some of the recipes, like Crunchy Hippie, were created after we were open. So while Ernest was open, I was just took a bike ride, and I was on River Road. I still remember about where I was at, and it hit me just like that. Like, a name was Crunchy Hippie. I didn't know what to do with that name, but I thought that was a great name for a beer. I don't know why, it just popped in my head. And then over the next couple of weeks, I would talk to Keith about it and stuff. But it ended up being like, hey, let's work around a liquid granola bar. The stuff that goes in a granola bar: wheat, oats, honey, raisins, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, stuff like that. And so we put together the recipe and we brewed it, and we added some of the stuff in the mash, which is where you get a lot of your fermentable sugars from, like the seeds rather than the raisins. The honey was added as a liquid. Oh, there's Keith's got his dogs visiting them. But we created it, and it seemed kind of, we brewed the first batch, it was kind of flat. It just didn't really seem to pop. It had some uniqueness to it. A lot of people don't realize that there's quite a good percentage of wheat in Crunchy Hippie. I wouldn't call it a wheat beer, but it's got way more wheat than a regular beer does. The wheat actually adds to a flavor profile. The wheat's not there to support like head retention or to do a little bit of something else. The wheat is a significant part of Crunchy Hippie, but it still tasted kind of flat. So we thought, well, let's add some fruit to it, just to give it something special. So we added mixed berries at first, and I think we did a couple batches, but we didn't like the mixed berries were kind of muddled. It really didn't seem to add much to it. So then we went with cherries. And we don't really like to talk about the cherries in there because cherries just support the flavors. If you're a chef at all, a cook, or watch cooking shows on TV, you'll notice that they talk about stuff that supports the flavor. Like, they'll mention something that's in the recipe, and you can't really taste it. But if it wasn't in there, you know, it would not be the same. And that's what the cherries do. The cherries add that something special. There's a little bit of sweetness at the end. Malt provides sweetness, but I think what you're really getting is a lot of the cherry sweetness. So this makes it really pop. And we market it as a granola brown ale. It's totally made up. I'll be very pleased whenever I see some other brewery making a granola brown ale, you know, because I know we did it first. As far as I'm pretty sure we did it first. So that's Crunchy Hippie. It has grown. We're having another Hippie variant today for some people because we sold too many 6-packs, more than we thought we would. So we've done variants, and the variant that's on the tasting sheet for some people will be Hippie for the holidays. We did a Black Forest version for the German American Fest people. They came and approached us about doing some kind of special, so we did a German chocolate one, which is a Black Forest cake. It was it's Black Forest cake. It was cherry and chocolate. We do Wake and Bake. Wake and Bake is maple syrup and coffee. Peanut butter version is very popular. So it's nice. We didn't start out to do this on purpose to make Crunchy Hippie this big, but it seems to work out. That it lends itself to variants. People really do like the beer, so it is our number one seller.
Yeah, and I've seen it seems to have really gotten a lot of good press. I've seen, obviously, the Toledo area is now very well known, but even the Plain Dealer, I saw they picked it up and talked about it. I know I have friends who buy it and then probably illegally ship it to their relatives. Once they've visited Toledo, had it, and now obviously can't get it. So with that in mind, kind of, I know there's now, obviously your beer is getting known outside of the Toledo area. I know a question that we've gotten from people that are attending this is, Is there a plan to have your beer distributed outside of Toledo, or is that happening now, or is it for now more or less going to be in the Toledo Beltway area?
Well, okay. Let me see. 2018, the fall of 2018, we signed an agreement with Heidelberg to distribute our beer. Up until then, so like the first year and a half we were open, I was driving the beers around in my Jeep, Toledo made Jeep. And we just got too many accounts. We saw where things were going. We were adding more tanks, so we needed a distributor. So we signed with Heidelberg, and we signed with them the ability to distribute through the whole state. But as it was said earlier by Mike, that our place is kind of small, so we only have enough production capacity for Northwest Ohio. We do ship some stuff, not very much, but we ship some stuff to Cleveland, and that's about it. So we would like to brew more beer, but we are maxed out in our current location.
No, that makes perfect sense. Now, you mentioned earlier how, you have a lot of different beers on tap, and obviously you guys showed an enormous amount of creativity in making your beers. Something I often hear from people in your situation is that when they first open, people would walk through the door and say, well, I want whatever tastes the blandest, most closest to Budweiser that you have. How do you get people? I know events like this help because people try things that normally they wouldn't try. But how have you helped to convince and grow your customer base by helping people branch out from the blandest, most mainstream type of beer to some of these more creative types of beer that you've been able to put out? And Scott, if you want to cover that, or Keefe, I don't know if either of you can speak to that.
I'll take it. Paul, yeah, thank you. We do get people that come in there. Most of the people that come in my place come in there on purpose. Like they love to drink craft beers. They go to breweries and they really want to try beers. But sometimes they bring along a friend or a family member. We usually start them out with easy. I've instructed my barkeeps. It's a very good practice to do. If someone seems unsure of what they have, I always ask my barkeeps, if they don't know what to say, ask the customer, what do you normally drink? And, of course, if they say Fat Tire, or if they say I normally drink a Guinness, point them towards a beer that's similar to that. But if they say I normally drink Budweiser or Coors Light, point them to Easy and just tell them, hey, Easy tastes just like that. There's a whole spectrum of beers, and Easy's on the far side, and then Fat Bastard and Orion are way over here. But as far as some people, they just drink Easy. We got some regular customers that have been coming in for years that I know by name now, and they just stick with that. And then some people come in, all they want is the strongest stuff. So it's a full spectrum. And some people have graduated on from easy on up to more, sophisticated tastes. But it is more ingredients. I like to equate it to food a little bit. Not everybody likes the spiciest food or most flavorful food. I guess easy would be like a hamburger, whereas like some of our more sophisticated things are a lot more complicated to make for us, and also more complicated for the customer to enjoy. Not everybody wants to analyze their beer. Some people just want to drink them. And we appreciate all customers.
I've got a quick little anecdote there, Paul. Yeah, I had one guy where I was working the bar early on, and we had a decent selection at the time, including a beer Fat Bastard, which is about the strongest, maltiest beer we have. And pretty much no one would ever recommend offering this beer to a beginner. But I was talking to the guy, engaging with him, and he wasn't really vibing on easy. And I asked him about beers that he liked, and it turned out that he actually liked malty beers, but it's so rare to run across a bartender who can make a recommendation for malty beers for you. And, if you go out to a normal restaurant, they probably don't have a decently malty, sweet beer on tap. And, but I recognize that that's what he was looking for. And this guy who's not much of a beer guy, I got him drinking some Fat Bastard, which is about the maltiest, sweetest beer we could offer. And he was happy with it. He just didn't like balanced beers, didn't like bitter beers. But you just got to talk to them. We encourage our staff to interact with people to figure out what they like and make a recommendation.
That's great. Thank you for that story. Sam, I'm going to turn things back over to you for our fourth beer of the evening, which.
All right. So this is going to be an exciting part of the event. We did not try this in our last beer tasting, and we really wanted to give our alumni an opportunity to participate. So as we kind of go into the next beer, we are going to invite some of our affiliate members to join in on the fun and just participate in this tasting with us. So this is up to my LGBTQA plus affiliate members that are on the call. We're going to go ahead and start promoting you so you can participate. But I'm going to go ahead and start, Keefe, with you, if that's okay. Would you mind, as I go in and start promoting our panelists, sharing a little bit of information about our next beers, the Snowy Mount Crumpet, and as Scott mentioned earlier, we do also have the Hippie for the holidays for some of those that came in a little bit later in the week.
Sure. Snowy Mount Crumpet. So this one is sort of a mashup of beer styles. It started off sort of as a hybrid of a Belgian white and sort of mixed with a hazy IPA. And if you know a lot about beer, those two probably shouldn't go together very well. But some Belgian wits are hazy, and they have spicy notes. Belgians will sometimes add spices right to their beers. And in this case, we used coriander and orange peel. And we thought about it, and, orange peel goes great with some fruity hops. So we sort of took some of the formulative aspects of hazy beers, notably Citra hops, and trying to create a permanent haze that includes a lot of extra flavor components into this beer. And so I think we married the two styles pretty good. It appeases some hops people, and it also leaves some of those Belgian type characteristics around for people who like those styles of beer. Scott, do you want to take a Hippie for the holidays?
Holidays, actually, I'm glad to take that. But this was actually Keefe's idea, if I remember correctly. And it wasn't that long ago. We're talking like a month, maybe 5 weeks ago. And it has to do with COVID. COVID made it that we have a brewery that has a certain production number. We can give you the number. I don't know, it's like 2,000 barrels a year. But what that really means is we're set up to brew a certain amount of beer a year, and we got to figure out where that beer goes. Well, normally the beer would go, a lot of it would go in a draft. We do very, very well with draft, sold all around Northwest Ohio and parts of Cleveland, where people go into a restaurant, sit down, get a beer, keep drinking beers all night long. But because of COVID, you know what? People can't drink that much beer, and people don't want to go out. So we switched a lot of our production to cans. So a month ago, 5 weeks ago, Keefe and I, we brainstormed and came up with a couple of new ideas. And Hippie for the Holidays was one of the new ideas we came up with. And I'm just going to call it right now, that Hippie for the Holidays, we're probably going to keep it. It really worked. Keefe and I have been brewing a long time. We don't do a pilot batch. Some breweries have a pilot system where they have a whole other brew system that's small, and they work on that and they perfect the recipes. We don't have the time, and we don't have the room for a pilot batch. And basically, Keefe and I we're pretty confident with our brewing. Together, we have over 30 years of brewing experience, recipe development. We've been at this now, I don't even know how many. We got to have over 100 unique beers that we've brought to market. So when we did Hippie for the Holidays, we were pretty confident it was going to work. And I think it worked. Keefe, what do you think of Hippie for the Holidays?
Okay, so well, to piggyback off Scott's intro, when we decided we were going to do it, we did it sort of based on the name, honestly. The Hippie variants have been very successful for us, so we decided to make a couple modifications to the base Hippie recipe. So there's a specialty grain that we use that imparts a very sort of rich, raisiny, fruity characteristic to the beer, and we decided to dial that back so that when we added spices, those spices would become more apparent in the end product. And it's a fair amount of spice variety that gets added to this beer. So we dialed back some of the specialty malt, And then we added, yeah, a lot of stuff: coriander, cinnamon, ginger, orange peel, allspice, and nutmeg. And so a lot of those are ground versions of the spices that get added in at the end of the boil. And so those impart flavors into the what's called wort at that point, and those flavors carry through all the way to the finished product. And spices are a dicey thing to brew with sometimes, because you always you want enough for them to be apparent, but you don't want them to overpower the whole beer. And this one, I think we hit that balance nice, because Crunchy Hippie is known as a drinkable but flavorful beer. And I think we hit it right on the money with the amount of spice we added.
That's great. Thank you. Well, now that we have all our alumni friends here with us, I would like to do a quick cheers to everyone on screen and to everyone at home. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Cheers.
I do want to say I can't keep up with Scott. He's already gotten like 3 down.
Are you finishing these as you go?
That's why Scott stayed home.
I did have
Alyssa, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if that someone answered, but I said I actually have 2 questions. It was either Scott or Keefe. You guys were saying that one beer was more complicated to make than others. What is it that makes that process more complicated? Like, is it just adding new flavors, or what is it that makes it more complex?
Oh, this would be good for Keefe to speak on. Specifically, Keefe, if you wanted to talk about Ozaftigs with the decoction and explain that. Yeah, it's got to do with technique. Keefe can explain it very well.
Yeah, so there's plenty of different techniques that we use, whether we're using fruit or anything else, just malt. But sorry, got a dog. Out! Get out of here! Out! Get down! But Scott specifically mentioned what's a technique called the decoction mashing. And so what we do, we mix all these hot grains, or these grains, with water, and then we separate the sugar runoff from the grain. And at the beginning of this process, what comes out is very thick, very sugar rich. And you can take that and you can actually, sort of like a candying process, you boil that instead of the full amount of liquid, and it intensifies a lot of those caramel type character that you would add to it. And then you can actually throw it right back into your mash to raise the temperature and even change more characteristics of it. And so there's this process. When we do it in our current form, it adds about an hour to the brew day. And so you can imagine when you tell your brewer, hey, by the way, we're going to decoction mash this one today, so you better plan on being home tonight at 8:30 instead of 6:30, because there's going to be extra cleanup too. But yeah, like fruit, for example, early on we used a lot of real fruit, solid as in actual pieces of fruit that we had to process in-house. And then we found suppliers for frozen fruit that helped move along that process. And then further yet, we've evolved that process also into using juices. And what we found with juices is that we get the best of both worlds. We get all the flavor, all the aromatic compounds that are associated with fruits, but we don't have all these solids that we have to worry about separating from the beer, because that increases losses. It also can result in all sorts of different problems. We've plugged up valves, carryover of seeds into the final product, all sorts of stuff you wouldn't even imagine can happen when you're using all these physical components of the fruit. So yeah, that's just a small sampling of some of the things that happen on when we're making it.
In that short amount of time, Keith, you have officially I had a dream in my head. I'm like, oh, I could brew beer. Like this is meant for me, like this job. And then in that short amount of time that you described that, I quickly realized that there's 0% chance I could ever do this and be successful.
If you're really interested in giving it a shot, I got plenty of stuff that needs cleaning.
Totally. Call me. Love it. Thank you so much for answering that question. And thank you, Alyssa, for asking it. Danielle, Brent, Ryan, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Is there anything that you guys wanted to ask Keefe or Scott? I know we talked a little bit yesterday about winter white ale. And Danielle, you mentioned that you had tried the Snowy Mount Crumpet last year and enjoyed it. Is there anything specifically that you guys wanted to ask while we have you?
I don't have anything. I'll give my time to Alyssa since she had another question.
Oh, did you, Alyssa? I'm sorry.
Actually, Emily had a question.
Oh,
We tried the new Blackberry Sour. It's a sour, right?
So good.
Tell us about that. It's not in this wonderful 6-pack, but like
It's awesome.
Yeah, so talk about it.
I love sours, and I know someone asked, like, is sours still a thing? And I was like, I love them. But go ahead. Sorry.
Scott, you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I can. Yes, I can jump in on that one. Gale's November. That was a beer, like Crunchy Hippie was named first. I knew I wanted to brew a beer to commemorate the Edmund Fitzgerald sinking. The story has been so long with me that I have a hard time explaining why. It just is. I was born in '67. The ship sank in '75, and that song came out like right afterwards. And I was an influential young man with my 9-volt transistor radio is what we had back then, and that song was played a lot. Anyways, I really internalized the record of Edmund Fitzgerald. I like the story. I've been up to the Shipwreck Museum way up in the UP that they have up there, and I've always liked it. And I thought, well, I should brew a beer for this. And this year is the 45th anniversary of the shipwreck. And it took a while. I thought, so like 6 or 8 months ago, I came up with this idea that I should do a Blackberry Sour, because I thought we've done different sour. The only reason I came up with Blackberry Sour, we've done other sour beers with apricots and cherries and stuff and pomegranates. So I thought, well, we haven't done a blackberry. And I thought we'd do a Blackberry Sour. We got to make it black. We've done beer in the past. For the first 2 years, we were called Weeble Wobble, and that was a blackberry beer. We haven't done it in the last couple of years, but that was not black. It was like this fuchsia pink color, because that's what blackberries really introduced. So this one we made black, and we used a really nice, smooth, I find it a very well-balanced souring bacteria. That bacteria does make it sour. When your milk gets sour, that's because of bacteria. Also yogurt, the tanginess from yogurt is because of bacteria. So the bacteria is used in beer, which sounds disgusting, but also is yeast. And I don't know if anybody thinks they really want to eat a lot of yeast, but but that's all part of beer making. But we make it safe for you. And the Gales in November just turned out great. It exceeded my expectations. We're almost sold out. I've had people contacting me via Facebook Messenger from I wouldn't say too much around the country. Not that many people. We're not that big of a brewery, but more than any other release we've ever done. People want to know if we ship beer, how can they get their own and stuff. And I have to explain it, especially if people are not beer people. They don't understand that breweries typically will put out these limited one-time only releases. Gales November and a lot of beers we do are designed to be a one-time only release, and that's it. We will bring Gales back next year, but we've done plenty of beers that were released one time. In fact, one of our most favorite beers that we did last year on February 29th was Leap Beer. And you got to wait 4 more years for that one until the next leap year. So the breweries, like how Keefe and I, how we positioned Earnest, is we're really creative. We have a lot of variety. And of course, I guess what comes with it is we disappoint people, because if somebody really liked Leap Beer, which is a strawberry lemonade beer, they got to wait 3 years and a couple months. So that's also the downside of it. But the upside is, we think is better, is that you have all these creative beers. I say we have 18 beers on tap, but that's not static. In 1 week, I bet you we're probably going to change 4 or 5 of those beers into something else.
Right.
I'm very, very sad. Very sad that it won't, that it's only limited time. But
Yes.
and that might be.
But we will. I will say, Alyssa, we will have something else for you that will catch your eye. We'll always have.
All right. I believe in you. But okay, I don't know if we're running out of time, but I do have another question. You mentioned that the Blackberry needed to be dark.
Yes.
What makes a beer darker than others?
It is magic.
No, okay.
Keefe, we're just went over to Keefe, and Keefe will geek out. And Keefe, talk about the rising bolt law. This would be incredible.
All right.
But we did make
Okay.
very legit wise.
I'll try to make it quick. So, because yeah, this one could go on for 15 minutes if we really wanted to. Yeah, Blackberry in a yellow beer makes a purple reddish beer. That just makes sense. But a Blackberry itself is darker than that purple reddish hue, and so we wanted to make it darker. And the traditional way you make a beer dark is you add dark malts when you make the beer. The problem is dark malts taste like burnt things generally. They can taste like roasted stuff too, more like coffee flavors. But if there's some stout lovers out there, you'll know you go after that stout because it has these roasty sort of ashy overtones that people like. And well, guess what doesn't work well with fruity flavors? Those kind of flavors right there. You don't want that's the subtle smokiness and roasty notes with berries. It just doesn't work. And so we're not the first one to think of this problem or address it. But so in Germany, very large brewers, German brewers are the most consistent, some of the most consistent manufacturers in the world. They strive for quality, and they have developed this product, probably over decades of research, that is it's a darkening agent that is made with beer ingredients that does not impart flavor characteristic. It's called Cinnamar, and these breweries will add it to a lot of amber and brown beers to make sure the color is consistent from batch to batch. And you can add it in very large quantities to turn a beer black as well without basically changing any of the flavor profile. And so we use this product a couple times a year for different beers. And this was one of those times where we got to use it definitely in a more creative manner. As we described to some people, that the Gales of November's, sort of the color was to remind you of the depths of Lake Superior.
That's awesome.
So,
Alyssa, I knew you were going to be the problem child yesterday, and I told you that I would turn your camera off and mute you when you got out of control. So
I'm not asking anything else. That's it. I'm done.
Well, I wanted to thank all of you, all of our guest panelists, everyone that's on screen, all of our guest alumni outside of Keefe and Scot are members of our LGBTQA+ alumni affiliate. They're board members who have agreed to join us as guest panelists. So with that being said, thank you. I have to apologize, Brent, you were the only one that listened and wore your shirt, I think. I'm in my dungeon right now, but they both have their shirts on. Oh, there you go, Ryan. I messed up. I'm in my dungeon where it's freezing cold, so I have my official jacket on. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and thank you all for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
We're going to go back to attendees. And I'm going to take this, or let Paul take over and lead us into our next tasting.
Sure. We're going to have a few more guest tasters on here in a second as Sam's getting those put together. But while Sam does that, New Sincerity is our next beer. I don't know, Keefe or Scott, which one of you should take it? I've been wrong the entire night. Every time I've guessed, I have 50-50 chance, and I've gotten wrong every time. So I'll let whatever one of you came up with that tell us about it. But I know this is another classic, another Earnest Brew Works classic. So do you mind taking us through the tasting for that?
Okay, so New Sincerity is a West Coast IPA. It is a recipe that predates the brewery, not by much. It was tweaked a lot in the year leading up to the brewery opening. But I'm sure you're wondering, what's a West Coast IPA? He said that. So West Coast IPAs are a trend that emerged in the IPA world probably around the year 2000. And the idea was that you make a lighter, less malty, where the hop flavor and aroma can really stand out in. Because if you think of the malt and the hops as opposing forces in a beer, if you take the malt down a notch, it also has the perception of raising the hops. And so if you keep taking the malt down, the hops will stand out further and further. And so West Coast IPAs generally don't have any notable malt characteristic, and are generally use very aromatic varieties of hops that tend to have more fruity characteristics, or some even into the piney range. But in this case, we use a blend of two hops, primarily Amarillo and Simcoe, to give this great bouquet of sort of fruity and slightly piney overtones. And it's heavily dry hopped as well. So there are a lot of hops go into the beer after it's made to give it more aroma. So a lot goes in late in the brewing process, and then also more goes in to basically the finished beer to enhance the aroma characteristic of it. So that's about it for that one.
All right, thanks, Keith. Appreciate it. Well, I'd like to welcome Mike McConan and Russ Ely. They are some of our guest tasters, longtime friends and members of the UT alumni community, friends of the Alumni Association. They obviously have held many different leadership positions there, but none of them quite as important as, as many of you know, the Alumni Association has the pavilion next to the glass bowl, where before every home game we have a big tailgate or pregame party. And Mike and Russ were our two unofficial beer taste testers. Every time over the past few years, we've brought in different places, Earnest and some other breweries, especially the alumni-owned ones, and they would always give us the official rundown of the beer we had on tap. So we figured we'd bring the unofficial experts in and spend some time with them here and talk about some beer. So gentlemen, welcome. And I know you've already submitted some questions online that we haven't gotten to. So if you want to go ahead and ask those, please feel free to do so.
I don't know about Mike, but usually when Mike's around, the beer tastes good. So I don't know if I qualify as a beer tester.
It's always better for us. But I do have one question. You said one was a West Coast IPA, and I know there's East Coast IPAs. What's the big difference on those?
Okay, so East Coast, it started off, East Coast sort of became hazy IPAs. There's been some disagreement as to whether East Coast style can be separate from hazy, but because of the success of hazy, it's basically overshadowed the difference between the two. But the idea between easies and it sort of transitioned into hazy IPAs was that that very juicy type hops with a richer, sweeter body would complement each other. And so a lot of these recipes include include oats that help increase the mouthfeel and malty sweetness you might perceive. And when you combine that with juicy type aromas of certain varieties of hops, and also using certain strains of yeast, notably English ones, that impart fruity esters and leave a sweeter finish. The basically the trio of that effect is a juice bomb, and that sort of has this overwhelming juice characteristic to these styles of beer. And you can argue fine points of whether or not hazy is completely separate from East Coast, but for the most part, technique wise, there's a lot of gray area and overlapping characteristics between them.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
No problem.
I'm an IPA guy. I love them. But I really like double IPAs. I know most people find them way too hoppy. I find them smoother. I like them better. I don't. Is there any reason why that would be?
Well, you probably just like stronger beer in general.
That's right.
And no complaints there. I'm drinking a 9%er.
Now, Mike, have you ever had the Earnest? We do have a double IPA. It's a honey forward IPA called Honey Buzz, and that's one of our oldest recipes. That goes back to when my Uncle Fred was giving me honey in such big amounts that I had to add too much to homebrew. I bet your recipe is 12, 15 years old. So, Mike, what do you think of the Earnest Brew Works Honey Buzz then?
I've had that before a long time ago, and I really liked it. I know you guys used to be, or when we had the UT football thing, at Inverness, you had some of that out there, and I liked that one a lot. Is that still, you still make that, or?
Now, that is a honey forward. A lot of people like to compare it to Hop Slam from Bell's. Bell's Hop Slam is a double IPA with honey. Ours was designed as honey forward, just because, like I said, my Uncle Fred was giving me way too much honey. So it's got double the honey amount, and we really accentuate the honey flavor with honey malt. So we like to say it's a honey forward. So it's got a sweeter amount. It's got over 9%. And I've been in a brewery a few different times when people have drank way too many honey buzzes, and I had to make sure that somebody else was driving in that group. Because it's got so much sweetness on it that you don't realize you're drinking a whole pint of a 9% beer. And after 3 of them, a lot of people, are wobbly.
Yeah, it does get a little tough on that area, and you fall down.
Yeah.
But and the 9%, at least to me, that's probably where I want to stop. When you start getting up over that, it tastes more just like alcohol.
Okay,
if I want to do that, I might.
Mike, you ready for this? Keefe can talk on this. Keefe, talk about the highest percentage beers we have, which would be the beers that have that little barrel effect to it.
Okay, so yeah, what Scott's getting at is that we can actually employ a lot of other special techniques to raise the alcohol very high. So we can use a special yeast that have high alcohol tolerances to create beers that are 13, 14% in alcohol. And then if you want to increase it more, you throw it in a barrel and let it sit for 9 to 12 months. And the pores in the wood on a barrel let out water vapor, but they don't let out alcohol. And so over time, a lot of the water will evaporate and raise it up between 1 and 2% is what we found with our barrel program, is that we generally get that little bit of a boost there. And some people love it. It adds a lot of character from the barrel. We use a lot of wet bourbon barrels. And so you get this bourbon note that works really well with dark beers.
Ross, is there anything you would like to add or ask about?
Well, not so much a question, just a request. Both Keefe and Scott have mentioned how much beer tasting they've done in order to come up with their product. I'm going to advocate for a committee, and I'm going to submit my name for those beer tasting committees, if you don't mind.
I see I'm unmuted, so I'll speak on that, Russ. you were not the first person to volunteer to come in and taste the beer. So we had a person that wants to volunteer to clean out the spent grain containers. So
well, for what it's worth, I've made my own, and I am willing to clean up. My wife can testify to my kitchen skills. So don't let that disqualify me.
I just have to step in that you talked about all the extra that you had. We have some friends that actually lived in Scotland, and he actually was making other kinds of liquors, but he took all this mash and other things that he had, and he kept pigs outside and fed them the slop from the beers. Another thing, and his pigs became so well renowned that the Queen of England actually took some of his hogs.
Oh, they'd be very prized.
So you need to just get like a little pig slop.
Yes.
I'm sure the city of Toledo or South Toledo wouldn't mind that at all.
I said it, but anyway, I just thought that.
Well, you talk about the grains and the leftover stuff. I was in a pub in DC one time, and they made their own beer, and they were using that stuff as a pizza crust. And I don't know if you could talk to Marcos and say maybe you want to try to make pizza crust with your leftover grains.
If someone wants to set it up, I'm game. Right now, a lot of it goes to feed a bunch of hungry cows in Wood County that really appreciate it. But I mean, there's going to be some technical things to overcome. But if someone wants to send them our way, we'll listen to them.
Well, I'd like to thank Mike and Russ for coming on and talking with us for a little bit. I think we're down to our final beer. So Sam, I'm going to turn things back over to you, and we'll get to taste the last and final, the Throwing Shade Black IPA.
All right. So I mentioned this in our practice session earlier, but I personally cannot participate in this tasting because the second I walked into my house with the 6-pack, one was stolen by Kevin. He just took the beer and ran and couldn't argue about it. So I hope everyone enjoys it. But Keefe, I'm going to ask you, and if you want to pass it on to Scott, that's fine. But if you could give us a little bit of information about our last beer, Throwing Shade. And then I would like to, I know we're a little bit over our time, but I would like to address some of the questions in the chat box. But I'm going to ask that you just kind of lead us into the last beer of the evening.
Sure. So Throwing Shade is a black IPA. And if you know what IPA stands for, that sounds like an oxymoron. So, which is India Pale Ale. And pale and black don't really mean the same thing when it comes to beer terms. But anyways, this was a beer style that sort of developed out of the Pacific Northwest about 15 years ago. And it was popular for a few years. And it won over a lot of people initially. And then a lot of brewers had trouble selling them. And so what we've done, we developed this recipe over a couple of years. We've tweaked it. And we bring it back once a year as a seasonal IPA for those people who love black IPAs. So we made only maybe 220 gallons of this beer this year. Most of it went right into cans. And fairly small amounts, but it's for those diehard people who want an IPA that has those hop forward aroma characteristics with this dark color that you wouldn't get in anything but a porter or a stout.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and cheers everyone at home, even though it's the wrong can, but I feel like I have to participate in some way, even though it's the wrong beer. But thank you, gentlemen, so much. As everyone's enjoying the last beer of the evening, I do want to kind of go through some of these questions. And I will say, Keefe and Scott, I'm going to put you guys on the spot and say that there's so many questions that we didn't get to this evening. So I feel like we have to do one of these again in the near future. So maybe sometime after the holidays, we'll have to coordinate another one and check in on you guys and see what you've been up to. But overall, all of the comments that have been coming in have been very positive, so we can't thank you guys enough. But some of the questions, and I apologize if these have already been answered, but I'm going to run through of them just to make sure we touch on as many questions as possible. But Tom had a question. He's asking, what do you mean by juicy hops? And I don't know who's the best person to answer, so Keefe, I have you unmuted, so do you want to take that one?
Okay, so quick answer would be hops that evoke a lot of citrus type flavors, whether it's orange or lemon or lime or grapefruit. A lot of those flavors are associated with certain types of hops. When you use a lot of them in one beer, it can give the appearance, or not the appearance, it can give the flavor of those fruits in the beer.
Oh, thank you. It looks like there's a question from Lindsay, and I had to kind of cruise past. I shouldn't have referenced Spice Girls because now I'm seeing some of the Spice Girl comments and I'm getting distracted, and there's songs that are playing in my head. But what beer pairs best with Smash Dog? And I have you both unmuted. So Scott, do you want to try that one?
Smash Dog. Smash Dog is great. They've been coming out to Earnest Brew Works very strong. They're one of the few food trucks that operate in cold weather conditions and stuff. Yeah, we love Smash Dogs. And their specialty thing and what they like to really sell is not even a real hot dog. It's like a panini press, like Cuban sandwich. Instead of the ham, they have hot dogs. It's so delicious. But the beer that goes best with Smash Dogs, well, the only honest answer is whatever beer you like best. I mean, because the Smash Dogs with the hot dogs got a lot of spice, a lot of garlic in it, and then you got the bread portion, and they had put cheese on it. There's a lot going on with the Smash Dogs. I don't want to call it, I guess, a hot dog. Yeah, burger sandwich, like a Cuban sandwich. But whatever you like goes really well with that. But they're curly fries. Now the curly fries I can pick on. The curly fries would be best.
Now I'm hungry.
The curly fries would be really, really good with an IPA. One of our IPAs that are not blackened, an IPA like New Sincerity would be good. Or we have JPA. Sometimes we have different IPAs on. If I counted, sometimes we have 5 to 6 IPAs on sometimes. This is an IPA. Oh, where's that? Right here. Well, not quite an IPA, but it's a wit beer. It is a pale ale. It's not quite the I part with India, but it comes off with the SRMs, or not SRMs, IBUs as an IPA. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question about Smash Dogs.
Yeah. And I want to be conscious of your time. Are you guys okay if I ask you 2 more questions?
Oh,
okay. So there was a question that came in earlier this evening that said, was that a cat? And I'm assuming that might have been a dog or some feedback. So I don't think anyone has any cats around, but Mike had a question. He had asked, does the frozen fruit change the taste from real fruit? How about, okay, Keefe.
I would actually say that the use of frozen fruit, as long as you include all the juices that were with the original fruit, would actually so what happens when you freeze fruit is that the water freezes. The sugars don't really freeze too well, but the water freezes, and the water, when it freezes, forms crystals. And when those crystals, and it also expands. So you have these water crystals forming inside of the fruit. What it basically does is it tears the fruit apart internally, which is why when you freeze fruit and you thaw it out, it gets mushy. It's because the cellular structure has been destroyed by the expanding water and the crystals forming. So when you take a frozen fruit like that and you put it into something else, it breaks down a lot quicker. It gives up its juice a lot easier. And with the juice comes flavor too. So I give a +1 for the use of frozen fruit over fresh fruit.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask one last question, and I do think we touched on this earlier. But before I ask it, I do want to just kind of let everyone know that's still on the call. I want to thank everyone for joining this evening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. But there were a lot of questions that were coming in just about how many people were on the call, how many people are participating. And Scott, you might be able to answer this. I know we talked about it earlier, but there was just over 85 people that had pre-registered to attend this program, and we have over 50 participants all over Ohio and up into Michigan. So although you can't see everyone except for those of us that are on the screen, we have alumni and friends from all over the area that are joining us. So it's been really great to see all the questions and comments coming in, and we really thank everyone for taking time out of their Tuesday evening to join us. But Scott, can you remind me how many six-packs, the assorted six-packs you guys went through over the last couple days?
Yeah, it's been going on for, I think, 2 weeks. I think that's how we set it up. And we sold 66 six-packs as of this morning. And I when I left the brewery to come home to do this about 5:30 or so, we sold another dozen more. So I bet we approached 86 packs sold. And
that's awesome.
And I was at the brewery for several of the sales, talking to alumni, and several people wanted more than one six-pack. And so, yeah, go ahead and take it. If you want to buy more Earnest beer, do it. And we've done a mixed six-pack. The mixed six-packs are a pain in the ass to like put together and snap and all that. And also for tracking purposes. Keith and I like to track ourselves. We like to know, hey, how much new Sincerity did we sell this month? Well, when you do mixed six-packs, I mean, this was the first time, and I'll tell you what, we would do it for the UT Alumni Association, but it's not something that we're going to do. Six packs.
Well, we appreciate it, and I would bet, and I feel confident in saying that our boss has probably referenced Paul and I as a pain in the ass numerous times. So I think he would very much appreciate the fact that we requested that of you guys. So with that, I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. Paul, is there anything that you wanted to add before, any questions that you personally had before we wrap this up for the evening?
Not really. I just wanted to obviously thank Scot and Keefe. I do have, is there anything, Scott or Keefe, you want to share about, anything that's coming up, any food trucks that are going to be there that you'd like to talk about? Either one, Scott or Keefe.
I can talk about what we got coming up. We're a full on for holiday beers. Holiday Toast was just canned today. Holiday Toast is a totally new beer. It's not based on an old recipe like, say, this one is based on Crunchy Hippie. Holiday Toast is an English ale recipe we created using Maris Otter malt. It uses English hops, English yeast. And what we did to make it Holiday Toast, we added cinnamon to it. So you'll be able to get that at Earnest Brew Works, and also it's being Heidelberg's picking it up tomorrow. So around here you'll get Holiday Toast. This year, COVID's really put a damper on some of the stuff. Normally we'd have all these events at the brewery. We would just have a lot of fun with the holiday season, but because of COVID, we put a lot of stuff in the cans and packages, so you can come in and get it to go, or buy it at local retailers that carry Earnest. So we really switched a lot of production and stuff. So you'll be able to find a lot of the holiday beers in cans. And that's what we got going on. And I'll let Keith speak about, because I'm not too sure, but we do have some bourbon barrel stuff or barrel beers coming out soon too.
Okay, so yeah, we do have a couple barrel releases yet this year. The first one, which is coming up very soon, might even be on sale this weekend. Check our Facebook for the details on that. But it is our barrel-aged holiday spicewood. So, actually, I was drinking a regular holiday spicewood, and so we also release a barrel-aged version of it every year. And so this year's we're aged in Buffalo Trace bourbon barrels. We're carbonating it up tomorrow and packaging it on Thursday and Friday. And this beer comes in a 500 ml bottle, which is about 17 ounces. It's perfect for sharing around the Christmas tree and or Thanksgiving, around the turkey too. But in addition to that one, the barrel-aged holiday spicewood, we also have a barrel-aged Orion, which is a dark imperial wheat ale. And this batch that's coming up was also aged in Buffalo Trace barrels. And that one, very complicated malt profile on that because it has a lot of wheat in it. Don't see many dark wheats, but when you put that beer in a barrel, something magical definitely happens. These rich, sweeter malt tones and the dark malts and the bourbon all combine to create something that is really unique, and it is great for gifting and sharing as well. So, but yeah, we want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. You've all been great with the participation, and we really love the local love and support that we see from everybody, not only from people on this call, but from all your friends and family that support us directly or indirectly.
Thank you, Keefe, and thank you, Scott. Thank you both so much. I think I speak for both Paul and myself in saying that this is definitely one of the better parts of our job. We have some absolutely fantastic alumni that have come out of the University of Toledo, but we are just so proud and thankful to have you guys in the Toledo area. I highly encourage all of you on the call today, and this call is recorded, so those of you that do watch it on demand, to visit Earnest Brew Works. As Keefe mentioned, great gifts, I can imagine. I know I'd be happy if someone bought me a 6-pack for the holiday. So you guys will see me in Earnest Brew Works over the next couple days to pick up my holiday beer. But on behalf of the Alumni Association, we can't thank you enough for joining us and doing this event with us. I also wanted to remind you guys again that this event is recorded, so we will get this information out to all of you that attended if you want to watch it again. And, you know, finish the beers if you didn't get through all 6 of your beers. And I also want to encourage all of you on the call, if you are interested in helping the Alumni Association plan more events such as this, we encourage you to join the Alumni Association. Some of the individuals that you saw on the call today, well, actually all of them, are members of the Alumni Association who serve on alumni affiliate boards, and they help us plan virtual content such as this. So join us. And as far as the questions that we didn't get to, we do record all of those. So Scott and Keefe, if I see any that we didn't get to, I'll probably be calling you to see if you can help provide some answers for us to get those out to our alumni and friends. But thank you again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Cheers to all of you at home. And thank you guys for joining us. Go Rockets.